Thank you for joining us today. We are thrilled to have the Director, Manpower, Personnel and Services, AMC A1, Colonel Robertson, joining us today. The views expressed in this presentation are those of the speaker and do not reflect the official policy or position of the United States Air Force, the Department of Defense, the United States government, or the Airlift Tanker Association. Please take advantage of the question and answer feature in Teams to submit your questions anytime during the presentation. There is no need to wait until the end of the presentation portion to submit your questions. Also, make sure to like questions by clicking the thumbs up icon. That way we know what you want to hear about. Now I would like to introduce Lieutenant General Retired Rusty Finley, the Airlift Tanker Association Senior Vice President, to get us started.
Well, good afternoon or good morning if you're on the West Coast out here like me in Phoenix, Arizona. It's a pleasure to have you all join us again in what is our 9th in this series of online seminars, and we've got a good one for you today. It's our pleasure to welcome Col Angenene Robertson, who is the AMC A1, an area personnel that everybody seems to be interested in, so I'm sure she's got some good tidbits for us today on how things are going in this COVID environment that we're living in, and where the talent management journey is going in the Air Force these days. So we're really looking forward to your presentation here, Angie. Angie has an extensive, great record and resume here. She's a graduate of Charleston Southern University, which is near and dear to my heart since I did a tour as the Charleston Wing Commander down there. Just about when you were in college. That's how old I am. She's also got an extensive Air Force resume here with overseas duty in Turkey and Guam and Germany, deployed assignments in Saudi Arabia and also in Kyrgyzstan. So she has a resume that a lot of personnel people frankly don't have, and I think it serves her well, obviously, as she's now our AMC A1 position, a very important position in the headquarters. So Angie, thank you so much for joining us today. And we're all very excited to hear what you have to say. I'll just reiterate what Popeye said at the outset, folks, and that is where we're different on these online seminar series than the majority of the COVID-like episodes that are on other sites is that we are interactive here. We have a live Q&A session that will follow Colonel Robertson's presentation. So please get your questions in. She's ready and anxious to answer your questions and do the best she can to get answers to what you ask. So over to you, Colonel Robertson. We really appreciate it and thank you.
Thank you, sir. I definitely appreciate it, General Finley, for this opportunity to participate in Seminar 9 of this series. As I mentioned before, I have been tracking some of the briefers that preceded me, and I'm pretty excited to be a part of the group. Also, thank you for the relationship and the partnership between ATA and AMC, particularly for the professional development of our mobility warfighters. So I definitely appreciate it. It's been my absolute pleasure to be part of AMC as your A1, and having served in multiple commands, as General Finley mentioned, I believe that Air Mobility Command is where it's really at, and it's where we really do a phenomenal job taking care of our airmen and our families, and the pride, professionalism, and the passion that I see exhibited throughout the enterprise, the AMC enterprise, it really and truly makes me proud. And so I just want to say to all that might be out in virtual land, definitely thank you and appreciate it, and I definitely am proud to serve with you. So the next 60 minutes or so will go by extremely fast, so we'll dig into my briefing. It'll be in 3 parts. The first part being what we have done from an A1 perspective with regard to COVID and the changes in policy that we've had to implement in order to support our airmen and families. Part 2 will be the talent management cycle And then part 3 will be what the AMC A1 family has done with regard to getting after one of the priorities of Develop the Force. So we'll start with the Covet Response, as you'll see from the slide. A couple of things I'll hit that's listed there. But if you can think back to March, the middle of March is when we were in the midst of, on the onset of COVID. At that point, we were doing travel restrictions. We implemented stop movement. We pretty much shut down with the exception of mission essential personnel. And we sent everyone home with a laptop to telework. And so in the process of doing all that, we continue to keep the machine moving as far as with airman movement. We continued with PCSs as well as TDYs. We exercise a tremendous amount of agility and flexibility regarding policy changes in order to protect our most valuable asset, and that's you and your families. Being proactive and responsive to the force, we were able to implement a lot of and get after some good policy changes with the speed of relevance, with continuous communication and collaboration within the A1 community, whether it was from HAF, AFPC, MAJCOM level, and also down at the base level as well with the FSSs. We worked externally outside of the A1 or outside of the personnel career field and partnered with TMO to move household goods. We also worked with SG for COVID testing and even worked with interagencies such as the Department of State for visas and passports when we ran into a couple of issues overseas. With regard to stop movement, we took a phased approach with a prioritized listing, as some of you may recall. We were able to do a 1 through 10 list, primarily for our military, but we also did the same for our civilians as well. Most of you are on the receiving end, or some of you may have been on the receiving end of those exemptions, as well as exception to policy memos that continue to allow our families and our airmen to continue to come to and from their next assignments with minimum delay. We also gave the opportunity for airmen, if they wanted to extend their assignment, if they wanted to delay their assignment, or even cancel their assignment when it was advantageous to them and their families. With regard to the travel restriction, most of you may recall the flow chart that we created, that AFPC created, that gave the go, no go with regard to if you were traveling to and from a green state and whether you needed to get an exception to policy or not. That's still out there on MyPERS, but we've also upgraded a bit and leveraged technology. And if you go to the Department of Defense website, there is a travel restriction app, if you will, or a link that gives you the ability to list the location where you're currently residing, and you can put in your destination and it'll automatically populate the travel restrictions for you. And then it could tell you whether it's a red state or a green state and whether or not you need an ETP. Telework, I mentioned that previously already, but we encouraged airmen and all airmen, military and civilians, to telework. And I must say, I'll give a quick shout out or kudos to the A6 community with regard to the amazing work that they did to expand the capability so that we all could telework. We expanded the VPN access to include 2 additional platforms, as well as Teams, whether it was Microsoft or CBR, and also Zoom.gov. And so the capability to telework has been absolutely amazing. HAF A1 currently is, they've stood up a working group to take a look at telework and all the lessons learned and bench practice, the benchmarks that we can move from the COVID environment to our new norm. And so we'll look to codified policy for both military and civilians with regard to telework. So more to come on that one. Fitness assessment. I know most of you are tracking already. About 2 weeks ago or so is when the new policy came out, or the extension of the policy to extend the physical fitness testing to resume 1 January of next year. So for those members that will end up testing, it'll only be the 1.5 miles, sit-ups and push-ups. And for now, the AC, height, and weight measurements are postponed until further notice. Understanding that a lot of our members were unable to take leave during COVID and before the end of the fiscal year, we are authorized to have a special leave accrual not to exceed 120 days until 30 September 2023. And so we're still waiting to get policy from HAF regarding our civilian personnel, but for military, SLA is authorized. For ID cards, I think most of the force is tracking the extensions that are out there. So for our airmen and families, our families and retirees, for their ID cards, the expiration has been extended to 30 June 2021. And so I'll say that again, the expiration date for retirees and for family ID cards or dependent ID cards is extended to 30 June 2021. We just got that on the 8th of September. Good news, because then that'll keep families from coming into the MPS to get ID cards. So that gives a little bit more, free up a little bit more space. However, if you are a CAT holder, a CAT card holder, and if you currently have an expired or expiring ID card or CAT card, it is important that you get that CAT card renewed before the 30th of September. And that just came down just yesterday. So I'll reiterate that of 30 September. If you have an expired or expiring CAT card, it's critical to get your CAT card renewed. We also extended the opportunity for members of the force to withdraw or extend their DOS, basically their separation or retirement. And so good news story there. We had about 1,000 airmen to take us up on that offer. And so that is, of course, helping considerably with retention. For the Humanitarian Service Medal and Armed Forces Services Medal, and I'll add to it as well, the Armed Forces Civilian Services Medal, that we just got notification on that yesterday with the civilian medal. That was, the guidance was posted about that. But bottom line, for members who were directly supported or participated in any type of humanitarian assistance or relief efforts for COVID, you are able to submit for an HSM or AFSM, and if you're a civilian, same apply. Time off awards. DoD approved the removal of the expiration date for the time off awards, which were granted between 13 March and 2019, or 13 March 2019 and 30 September 2020. What that allowed us to do is have an unlimited expiration date. However, if you received a time off award outside of that timeline, then you still apply for the 1 year time limitation. So a lot of big rocks that were applied over the last 6 months or so, but the biggest takeaway is there was a lot of discussion and a lot of adjustment to policy based on the needs of our airmen and our families. And I will tell you, it was just amazing, and it still is, to be able to watch the personnel machine go in order to, again, take care of you all. So if you didn't see something that, or if you saw something out there that you didn't think was quite right, or if you have ideas on how we could do things better, definitely hit me up on the chat box or give me an email, but I'd love to hear what improvements we can make that will help you, because we're here for you. Next slide, please. So talent management, as you can tell from the right-hand side, the blue chart, the talent management life cycle is exactly what we do all day, every day, from talent acquisition as far as recruiting and bringing in airmen, and I use that capital A Airmen for officers, enlisted, and civilians. So we bring them in. We do development and utilization. We evaluate you and develop you. There's the compensation aspect and retention. And then the other aspect is the transition, whether you transition to retirement or transition to go to another job. But at the end of the day, it's a wash and repeat cycle. But this is, of course, near and dear to my heart with talent management. Cultivating a lethal, agile force depends on our ability to integrate new capabilities, adapt approaches, and change business processes to achieve mission success. To this end, we've made significant strides in transforming talent management over the past few years, with a few additional changes in the early stages of development. And so we'll start with talent marketplace. I believe most of our viewers may have had an opportunity to at least play around with talent marketplace, but it started out initially as just a few officers, officer AFSCs, but it has now expanded to 100% of all officer AFSCs loaded into talent marketplace. And currently AFPC is expanding that capability to a few other enlisted AFSCs, and also our total force with regard to the ARC for Guard and Reserve. But bottom line, this is the marketplace is the new web-based assignment system that is created to provide transparency, agility, and responsiveness in how we do officer assignments. So far, again, we implemented in March of 18. So far, positive results. We realized that it won't be 100% of a match for everyone involved. And when I say everyone, as far as the officers who are on the VML list, the hiring authorities or billet owners, and also our commanders. So we realized that it won't be 100% because when you're dealing with assignments, there's part of the art and science that goes into it. And not all of our assignments will go through talent marketplace. For example, school, special duty, and command. So we realize that not 100% will be matched through marketplace, but right now we're at about a 66% match rate, which is pretty high considering we're just over a year and a half of having it on the streets. Officer, instructor, and recruiter special duty, that started April of 19. And we, as far as an Air Force, made a deliberate, more of a deliberate force to screen and select officers to produce and develop the next generation of Air Force officers or airmen. And so at the end of the day, this is something that we value extremely, along with the Secretary of the Air Force. And so for those officers who are selected for this program, it is a boarded position and very deliberate in nature. The first cohort of the first cohort started this summer, since we started the program or started the boarding process last year. So they were boarded last year, but going into their first round into instructor or recruiter, special duty. And so we look forward to getting a lot of good feedback from the force on that aspect. PRF, As most of you are already tracking, in September, so it's been almost a year, we went from the 9-line PRF to the 2-line PRF. Great opportunity for senior raters to give direct, deliberate, and clear guidance to the board on an officer's potential, potential to serve. And so, as you recall, in the past with 9 lines, it was just a regurgitation of what was already in the members' records. That aspect is gone, and so the focus is definitely on the record of performance, as well as the 2 lines that come from the senior rater with exactly what he or she wants to communicate to the board. So far, from what we're hearing, is definitely positive feedback from our promotion board members. The next is career development briefs. Definitely critical. We'll talk about the developmental categories, but definitely a key piece as far as having those career development briefs. They're updated annually by the functional community, but this is a great way to communicate, to use as a transparent reference material to communicate to officers, to mentors, hiring authorities, as well as members that are sitting on the developmental, on the boards that will select our officers for, as part of the developmental categories. So they'll use these career development briefs to really be able to gauge what's important for those particular career fields that they're boarding. And now, by the way, for officers, if you're interested in where you can find your career brief, it's definitely listed on my purse. And we used it for the first time in May for the Lieutenant Colonel's Board, which, by the way, we're expecting results within the next couple of weeks. Developmental categories is the next topic. We implemented that starting May of 20, so just this year. We transformed from single line the Air Force into 6 different categories, and the intent is to unlock developmental agility by organizing peer promotion groups. And so the first board that used the developmental categories was again in May, and so we'll look forward to getting some feedback on that aspect. The next is the transition from BPZ to merit-based reordering. And in essence, this opportunity provides officers the opportunity to be deliberately developed with a little bit more depth and experience outside of, well, I shouldn't say outside of, but to give our high-performing officers the opportunity to grow and develop into areas such as joint or special duty assignments, but it gives them the opportunity to extend their developmental opportunities as well as operational assignments with increased on-ramps and improved quality of life and stability. So we did that transition, the elimination of BPZ, and then rolled into the merit-based reordering. I'll insert into the conversation OES transformation for the officer evaluation system. I know there's a lot of discussion in reference to what's next and what does the new OES system look like. And I will tell you, and oh, by the way, why are we transforming our system? So a lot of questions are out there, I would imagine. I'll start with how do we get here? When General Goldfein was the CSAF, he would conduct his base visits, of course, and part of his base visit was to discuss the squadron vitality. And so part of the feedback that he got from Airmen was that with the current evaluation system, that it did not adequately define or promote based on the qualities needed to succeed. And so he took that information back, and the half A1 team started working with the end state of an OES transformation system that would effectively identify, develop, promote talent based on the qualities needed to increase lethality and joint warfighting excellence. So at the end of the day, what we need to do is define what we value as our institution and as airmen, and then measure, train, and develop against that. And so we'll see that roll out when we get an opportunity to see what our new evaluation system will look like. And I will tell you, I won't be able to release a lot of the data that you may want to know as far as the particulars on the OES system. I definitely don't want to get too far out ahead of the CSAF or General Kelly. I will give you a slight peek under the tent with regard to a timeline as far as 3 main milestones, with the first being within the next couple of months. So for fall of 2020, the expectation is to roll out guidance for an interim stratification policy, as well as a feedback rubric. And so with both of those, with the strat policy and the feedback rubric, you'll start to see the forming of our new eval system. And again, that's fall 2020. Fall 2021, we'll see the OES system get announced to the field. And at that point, that's when we'll start to pilot that, and we'll have months of piloting, as well as multiple organizations involved in the process to see if this is really and truly what we're going to move forward on. And then fall of 2022 is the target for when the OES will go live. So this is, of course, 20, so we got another 2 years to do the interim strat, as well as the feedback, followed by the piloting of the OES system, and then the go live in 22. For diversity and inclusion, as most of you are already aware, a lot is hitting the installations, or going out to the installations with regard to diversity and inclusion, and also training associated with that. From a big picture perspective, Air Force wide, there are 3 major initiatives that are being pushed from DoD. Short term, we develop recommendations for immediate action, which you've probably read about with regard to the removal of photos from promotion boards or from selection boards. Also review of hairstyle and grooming policies, as well as the education of the force on unconscious bias training. Midterm, the intent is to establish the Defense Board on Diversity and Inclusion, which will provide ideas by the end of the year to address racial diversity. And then long-term, the intent is to create a Defense Advisory Committee on Diversity and Inclusion in the armed services. So you'll start to see, as those boards start to develop, we'll start to see some additional changes in policy, as well as training in how we get after D&I for our force. Telework, we chatted about already, but bottom line, more to come with regard to policy from the Air Force. Direct and expedited hires, this is on the civilian side. So a couple of years ago, SECAF was definitely interested in onboarding our civilians at a quicker rate. We were onwards of 180 days plus with getting civilians hired. And so the SECAF made a concerted effort to make sure that we got that down to about 80 days to onboard. Not quite there yet, still working on that aspect, but one of the initiatives that came from that effort was the direct and expedited hires. What I want to point out with that is just recently the military family housing positions were added to the direct hires, and that way our airmen who are living on base can have a little bit more manpower, if you will, in the family housing office to get after some of the issues that we've heard about and that we've experienced, particularly with mold in some of the houses. But due to the direct hires, we have about 47 direct hire positions going across AMC into those positions to help our airmen, as well as the child care providers. The last two that I'll mention are key for our families. Court order child custody. On the 28th of July of this year, the Secretary approved the court order child custody assignment or deferment consideration program. And this was established in order for our airmen to co-parent with their significant other so that they're geographically located. And so it gives the airmen an opportunity to apply for an assignment so that co-parenting can happen. And so good news story there for our airmen. And then the last one, airmen or Air Force Families Forever. We always talk about airmen or how our families are important. And we definitely talk about airmen and families as it applies to our Air Force. And oftentimes what we found was after a military member became deceased, the family felt as if their ties to the Air Force had been disconnected. And so with the Air Force Families for Life or Air Force Families Forever, this program was extended or expanded for lifelong support and outreach for surviving family members who are defined as the next of kin, whether it's the spouse or the children, parents, or siblings. It also expanded the installation access to the next of kin, regardless of the circumstances in which the death occurred. And finally, it extended the opportunity for families or for next of kin to participate in the MWR or morale, welfare, and recreation activities on the installation. Next slide. So for AMC Priority, right now the Develop the Force Priority, A1 is the champion for that. And I'll just list a couple of things that we're doing to get after it, but we're continuing to revamp those efforts on a regular basis. But in particular, in the past year or so, we fielded a spouse resilience toolkit. We published the first AMC civilian mentoring and professional development guide. We increased deliberate development for the 3 Phoenix Horizon programs. And we also executed the AMC We Care, We Connect, which is intended to provide talking points as well as subjects for small group discussion within our units to facilitate the connection, the belonging, as well as resiliency. This week, as we look at developing the force, this week we have a couple of sprints already in play where we're looking at the lines of effort as well as milestones with how we tackle develop the force. And so we'll continue to, again, further define and further come up with programs and ways to get after develop the force. So in the interest of time, I'll hold. I could talk all day, but I'll hold and we'll take questions. Over.
All right, ma'am, thanks so much for that. We are going to roll right into the questions now. The first question that came in was, teleworking is great for some career fields who have close proximity work center. Is it being discussed to continue as a potential option for all components in the future?
If I heard correctly, the last part was for all components in the future?
Yes, ma'am, for all components in the future.
So I'm not sure what direction that's going in, but I will say from a telework perspective, again, it is being looked at half, and so we'll be able to get a little bit more clarity on that with regard to, again, definitely military and civilians, but I guess when they say all components, if that means total force, I'm not quite certain, but either way, we'll stand by to get the more detailed codified guidance from HAF once they finish with their working group. Over.
All right, copy that, ma'am. Another question here is, you mentioned that you're getting good feedback from the promotion boards, but what's the feedback from the officer corps writ large, the new 2-line PRF, i.e. do the service members like it, or are we just getting feedback from the boards?
So good question. I think that so from my perspective, from my view, limited feedback directly from officers. I think it probably depends on who you speak with, but ultimately good opportunity for them being the officer to be able to get direct feedback as well with the communication from the senior rater. Because again, previously the 9 lines, really 7 of the 9 lines just rehashed what was already in the records. And so again, the 2 lines just cut straight to it, and it gives the officer an opportunity to be able to get that that direct and clear communication as well of what was communicated to the board. Over.
And as someone that just had to do one of these, I can tell you not having to do a justification sheet and not having to go back through all of those things is very nice and frees up some of my time. So
it definitely saves a lot of time, for sure.
Absolutely. So why should professional development beyond what the Air Force provides be a priority for airmen?
You know, so a couple of things there. For me, when I think about just overall development, whether it's Air Force development or non-Air Force development, at the end of the day, we should always want to have that thirst or that drive to want to learn. And so to me, once we stop learning, we stop living. And so to always continue to have that development throughout one's career and throughout one's life is important. And so once you start developing through PME, that makes you a better airman. Once you start developing outside of PME, whether it's through a trade or whether it's through a civilian university, but it makes you a better individual to be able to use a skill set and experience to bring it back to the Air Force, where you as a person are better for it, and it makes the people around you better, as well as the organization better for it, number one. Number two, we do talk about diversity, and so yes, there is diversity with regard to race and color and religion and, you know, fill in the blanks, but there's also diversity in thought. And so if you expand your horizon, if you will, so that it's not just Air Force focused, to me, again, it just contributes to a better organization and to further expand that diversity of thought.
Yeah, we at the Airlift Tanker Association couldn't agree more. That was the whole reason we started this virtual seminar series, was to make some of these opportunities, especially in the time of COVID, available to our airmen and partners, because we think that professional development is so important. So the next one is another question that follows that line. It says, for officer professional development, what's the latest philosophy on advanced degrees?
Great question. It depends. It depends because, if we go back to that, to the career development briefs, I'm personnel. And so my career field may say, Angie Robertson, thank you for serving. We appreciate your bachelor's and we're good with you having a bachelor's. No need to continue any type of advanced studies. Whereas another career field, for example, acquisitions, or for example, occupational analysis, they may want to have their members, their airmen, continue on with that further development. So, that's where it gets into the interesting part of having the developmental categories associated with the career briefs, because the career briefs will define exactly what's important to that AFSC, and it'll also define a career progression of what's needed and when. And so, great question. And again, I go back to the it depends.
Outstanding. So we're going to roll right into another one of these type of questions, and it's what can you tell us about how COVID has impacted rated personnel retention?
Good question. So we did. So when I say we, AFPC initially when COVID rolled out, and we started looking at the rolling, giving officers, particularly rated officers, the opportunity to extend their DROS, or I'm sorry, not DROS, but their DOS, to extend their DOS, or to extend their, to withdraw their DOS. We thought that there would be more to that would want to take us up on that opportunity, but that didn't happen. So the rate in which people departed was pretty much the same, even though we still had rated officers continue to stick around, but there were more people who left than what we anticipated. And so now it's a matter of balancing. Of course, there's the production line from a UPT perspective. COVID has definitely impacted that. And so now just trying to do the catch up with the COVID ops, or COVID impact with mission operations, as far as trying to get rated or IPTs through the pipeline so that we can keep that production going. So there has been impact on the front end and the back end. So it'll be interesting to watch it over the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's very interesting. As a rated person myself, right now I don't have any plans on going anywhere, but to see what's going on in the civilian community on the aviation side, and the stability that the Air Force offers is definitely attractive. I'm going to shift gears a little bit here with the next question. It says, can you discuss what is being done to provide COVID testing of service members prior to deployment/redeployment?
So with the COVID testing, and I can speak to it, especially with folks going to, with airmen going to Turkey. There are a couple of working groups that are looking at that particular issue to make sure that we are meeting the host nation requirements with regard to testing, whether they test prior to their departure from home station, or whether they test at BWI. But right now, the plan is for members to continue to get tested until we're able to set up permanent testing facilities in locations in Baltimore as well as Seattle. So the plan is to have members obviously test before they get into country. And also, by the way, it depends on the country and the country requirements. But at the end of the day, for Turkey specifically, there is a requirement for it to be 72 hours prior to getting into the country. So we watch that very closely to make sure we're in compliance. But definitely SG has the stick on making sure that our airmen are compliant with regard to COVID-19 testing. Over.
Great. We got another question that just came in going back to some of the personnel stuff, and that is, what is the initial feedback on the restructuring of the zones for officer promotions?
So haven't gotten any yet. And again, we just went through, we just used the developmental categories in May. And so I think it'll be pretty limited as far as limited what's released to the field, but so far have not received any guidance or any feedback.
Great. Yeah, that would have been some early feedback, but I'm sure it'll be coming in soon. The next question is going to completely change to a different topic, and it's, can you talk about your experiences with diversity and or racism?
Okay, yes, I can. With regard to diversity, obviously I'm a diverse candidate, if you will. And I will tell you, you know, it's important for me as I've been in the military now for 25 years. And so it's important for me as I, look on the walls or as I come into a staff meeting to see more diverse candidates or more diverse officers or more diverse enlisted members as well as civilians in the room. And so we're not there yet. We're working on it, but we made some strides and we have a good little ways to go to get there. For me, I want to pull people forward as much as I can and be that mentor for airmen so that they then can replace me in the conference rooms or on the walls. But diversity is definitely key to, one, the success of the military, the success of our Air Force, and as far as in a society overall, we have to incorporate diversity within our ranks. Racism, I will tell you, I'm from South Carolina, and so born and raised in South Carolina, and had the opportunity to travel with my dad, who was in the military when I was in about the 6th or 7th grade. But nonetheless, having grown up in South Carolina and have been called names that, as my grandmother would say, not a child of God, call me everything except for a child of God. But it's out there. It definitely exists. And I think it's we from a Air Force perspective, and we as a nation, by addressing those issues head on, the timing now is unlike any that we've experienced before. And so I look forward to the change that's going to happen. Over.
Ma'am, thank you so much for that honest and deeply personal talk there on a very sensitive and important topic. The next one's going to be a little bit more lighthearted, and this is actually one of my favorite questions I try to get to all of our speakers is, can you tell a story about an airman that impacted you?
Yes. So I love airmen. I am, of course, being personnel, people is our business. And so I've had the privilege and the opportunity to work with some amazing airmen of all levels, officer, enlisted, and civilians. And I'm impacted every day, I'll put it that way, impacted every day by what we do and what we have our airmen do. Especially when I say airmen, I'm particularly focusing in on our enlisted airmen, because they come in at 18 and the jobs that we give them, their AFSCs, what they do out on the flight line, turning wrenches for multi-million-dollar aircraft, or being on the front gate providing security, or being in the dining facility, providing, meal support. But everything that we have our 18-year-olds do is just absolutely amazing. And then again, like I was saying, all the way up to our O's as well. But to answer the question, I would say that an airman that impacted me the most, and it was someone who I just met. I had probably about 3 or 4 years ago. I had an opportunity to go to BMT to check out a recognition program, as well as their graduation. And at the end of the graduation, if you've never been, at the end of the graduation, all the airmen are standing in formation, and the intent is for their family members to come over and tap them out. And so when they tap them out, that means, they can, of course, fall out of formation and, get all the hugs and kisses and the love and all of that from their family members. And so what I was doing was just kind of strolling through the formation, in between family members, just checking to see who I could tap out. And so I tapped a couple of them and I asked, hey, is your family here to tap you out? And I had about 5 or 6 of them to say yes, that their family was there. And so I just kept going to the next person, and they would continue to stand at attention until their family members came. So anyway, I finally made my way to a young lady, and she was standing there. And so I asked if her family was there, and she told me no. And I said, oh, okay, so where's your family? Where are they from? Where are you from? And so she told me that she was from Manas, or Kyrgyzstan. And so I said, oh, okay, how close are you from Bishkek? And Bishkek is the capital in Kyrgyzstan. And her eyes just lit up, just as big as moons, because of course she wasn't expecting anyone to know, 1, Kyrgyzstan, and 2, the capital. And so I did tell her that I was deployed there, a couple of years prior. And so we had a quick conversation, but the reason why she impacted me is because my intent was to impact her and impart knowledge on her, and to tap her out. But she actually tapped into me with the constant reminder as leaders that we have got to stay connected to our airmen, and we've got to get to know them, and we've got to get to know their story, because she had an amazing story. And that day is when she became an American citizen. And I told her that her family may not have been there, but welcome to the Air Force family. And so we should never, as leaders, as airmen, period, pass up an opportunity to get to know someone. Over.
Man, what a powerful story. And I've spent a lot of time in Kyrgyzstan and Manas as well, and gotten to know some of the people, and just such an amazing culture. And really, when you do take the time to get to know the people and get to know the culture, it enriches both their lives and our own. So what a great story, and what a great finish to the question and answer, because unfortunately we're about out of time there. So I'm going to give it to you, ma'am, for your closing remarks, and then I'll give it back when you're done to General Finley for some thanks and some other announcements. But thank you so much for your honest and candid answers today, and for joining us.
Thank you. Definitely thank you for the opportunity, General Finley. Again, thank you, sir, for the opportunity to engage with our airmen, with our mobility warfighters. What an amazing organization ATA is. And I'll just say one quick story that last year was my first year of doing ATA, and I absolutely loved it. I walked away feeling proud to be an airman and proud to be a mobility airman. And the highlight, of course, was getting the opportunity to meet Colonel Halverson. And so I was looking forward to ATA this year to be able to see him again and to hear his story. But I tell you, after 4 days of being around mobility airmen, it just really cemented for me the important mission and the important relationship that we have with one another. So just, this is a great format, but I tell you, I hate that we can't do it face to face, but definitely appreciate the opportunity. Over.
Absolutely, and I tell you, this is actually Gail Halverson's 100th birthday year, and we had big plans for the convention to celebrate that because he really is a national treasure, and I've been privileged to spend a lot of time with him, so I can definitely relate. But you know, as we said, we're gonna do the best we can and still provide these professional development opportunities for our airmen, both through the virtual convention and this series. General Finley, send it to you for closing comments.
Well, thanks, Popeye, and a big thanks to Colonel Robertson. Angie, thank you so much for what an interesting and very thorough and comprehensive discussion. And again, another robust Q&A that I think most, if not all of our mobility airmen need to hear your perspective on some of those questions that you answered. I was a little bit surprised at the answer to the impact on the rated officers with respect to COVID. I thought it would help retention. Apparently it's not yet, but the other thing, your answer on diversity and racism is something that every airman needs to hear, not just the mobility airman, but every airman needs to hear. That's a